start frontline about EverPass. What is it, where is it, and how does it play?
Sure. So EverPass was sort of constructed about 2 years ago. The thought of it came about 2 years ago. And, you know, an old colleague of mine from DirecTV, Alex Kaplan, and I were sitting down. Alex, after leaving DirecTV, went into the NBA also and then spent time with Discovery running their international golf D2C business.
Right.
So we were talking, and we said, you know, with the fragmentation that's happening, all the sports moving to streaming, there's no real solution for bars and restaurants, commercial establishments, because you actually need a sales force. You need the infrastructure and the aftermarket support. And we said, you know, at the same time, we knew the NFL Sunday ticket rights were coming up for renewal with DirecTV. And we had both been at DirecTV. I had actually, you know, purchased these rights on several occasions. And from the time that I was at DirecTV to now, their sub base is halved. So we all know any major rights holder is only looking for increases in their fees. And there was no way those two were going to combine to result in a renewal. And so we went to the NFL and said, hey, it's more than likely that you're going to sell these rights to one of the streaming platforms. And they ultimately did to YouTube. They're not going to have a solution for this. Why don't you sell us, carve out the commercial rights and sell those to us? We'll create a platform, we'll create a company even for that and have the NFL invest with us. We then brought in RedBird Capital, who, you know, was here also, who obviously has invested a great deal in sports, to form this company called EverPass Media, really for the distribution into bars and restaurants. And so fast forward, you know, from there, we have, after having the NFL Sunday ticket rights, we also did a deal with Peacock. Which Peacock in the U.S. has the Premier League rights, Big Ten sports rights, a couple of NFL games, and as everyone here knows, they are one of the new rights holders for the NBA package, of which some subset of those games will be only on Peacock. And then more recently, just last week, we announced a deal with Amazon. Amazon has the Thursday Night Football rights in the U.S., and so we now have the ability to broadcast those games into bars and restaurants. So what we saw is not that there was a missing market. There was clearly a market here. We just started looking for a better way to serve that market.
So let's unpack that a bit. I mean, clearly it's a valuable segment in the United States with the enterprise segments. It's a big addressable market, and you've come in with those rights. How does it work at the enterprise end from a sort of consumer experience and with the data that flows through the platform? Are you happy with that? And then the second thing, how do the economics work?
Sure. So I think for enterprises, you know, if you go into a bar or a restaurant right now, you'll see the game on television, and that's all you're going to see, and the associated advertising and such that goes with it. Now I think the platform that we're building for them is a digital streaming platform, much more flexible. Get the games, but then on top of that, we can build sort of second screen interactivity. We can bring targeted advertising and performance marketing. The owners of the establishments will actually know what their patrons are watching, what they're consuming. You know, is now the right time to have an offer for an extra beer and burger for half off or whatever it is. And then I think there's additional sort of ancillary products that we can start to offer, whether it's sort of in-venue competitions, gamification of the experience. And really, at the end of the day, what we're trying to do is create an environment. It's actually quite simple, Vivek.
Got it.
They want to keep their patrons in there eating and drinking longer, and that's a concept that I understand.
Right.
So we're trying to provide that.
What about the plans for international and Asia? Where does that figure in EverPass's strategy?
Yeah, so the two things I just mentioned are actually critical to that. One is having our own streaming platform, because technology, as we know, is not sort of bound by geographic frontiers. You can take the same technology and scale it in the U.S. to any other geography. Then having TKO in as an investor is also beneficial. That's all part of the Endeavor IMG world.
Right.
Dale and Sam are here somewhere.
Sure.
They're sort of jotting notes and making sure I'm performing adequately in terms of their investment. But really, IMG Media, if you think about it, they are on multiple sites of rights transactions all over the world.
Right.
So being actually able to understand sort of which markets make sense in that that they're sizable enough, same sort of desiring of community viewing, you know, in a bar, in a pub, drinking, and sort of that camaraderie of watching sports. But also, you know, big part of this is when certain rights come up.
Right.
And having those guys at our side now to help us as we think about the international markets is going to be very helpful.
I want to move to the broader sports ecosystem, you know, wearing your multiple hats, but let's talk about, firstly, a high level, you know, the sports ecosystem. How do you see those developing? We heard a lot of chat yesterday. Demographics are evolving. Digital platforms are getting involved with a lot of big, deep bets, both globally and in the US. How do you see that developing?
Look, I think, you know, the major sports are going to still command the major audiences. I think what you're alluding to, what a lot of people have covered, is just how do fans engage with the IP. And in the past, it was you sit down, watch a full-length game, and that's it. Now you're sort of bombarded with it at all times. And this, for me, it really started, the awareness of this started when I was running the NBA in China.
Right.
As we started to do deals with you know, Bilibili and Douyin and people like that, the understanding of the need to sort of be on every platform. And it's not the live game necessarily, but it's all that other content and complementary content that goes with it that continues to sort of engage the fans. You look at it, you know, from a Liberty Media standpoint, and we own Formula One. As you know, I'm on the board of Liberty Media, and you know, things like Drive to Survive, right? That's a show that came about there, and I think it's finished its 6th season, you know, which has brought a whole new awareness to the sport in terms of some of the demographics and some of the populations that have never really interacted with Formula One.
So that transformation story brings me to an interesting point on Moto GP, right? This is a transaction that's being done. I know it's seeking approval. What's your perspective on that deal, and what's the strategy there insofar as you can speak about it?
Look, I think that there are very few sports assets available where you can actually own the whole sport, own the league, right? You see people now buying pieces of teams and things like that, which is a totally different investment thesis. This is actually to own it and run it and grow it. And I think from a Liberty perspective, what they saw was surely a high margin business, not very capital intensive, good free cash flow. But really at the core of it, just like with F1, there's this core market and a base of passionate fans. And I think what we also saw was the ability to grow that, right, just like we've done with F1. So people sit there and say, oh, you're going to run this, you know, as one entity. I don't know how Liberty's going to run it. I'll leave it to those guys. But I think that at a minimum, understanding the playbook on sort of what we did at F1 and extrapolating that to Moto GP. Again, the high-end experience, the fan experience. It's how do you bring some of this to life, right? You think about the Netflix show, again, Drive to Survive. There's a movie coming out on F1 on Apple next year. Similar sorts of concepts around Moto GP. I think there's a lot to go after. And so being able to sort of take our learnings and apply it to this sport